The unexpected alliance. The Grand Council chamber stretched endlessly before Marcus Rivera, its crystalline walls reflecting the nervous energy of 1,000 delegates from across the galaxy. He wiped his sweaty palms against his formal diplomatic uniform, the fabric doing little to calm his racing heart. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension as voices rose and fell in heated debate. Marcus had been Earth's junior ambassador for only 6 months, still learning the complex web of galactic politics that governed the known universe. Today's emergency session had been called to address the growing crisis in the Outer Rim territories, where resource wars threatened to tear apart the fragile peace that had held for decades. At the center of the chaos stood Queen Zephyra of the Valorian Empire, her tall, graceful figure commanding attention despite the hostile atmosphere surrounding her. Her skin held an ethereal blue-silver hue that seemed to shimmer under the chamber's artificial lighting, and her long, flowing hair moved like liquid starlight. Most striking were her eyes, a deep violet that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages and the weight of countless decisions. The Valorian Empire refuses to surrender the mining rights to Kepler 442b, she declared, her melodic voice cutting through the cacophony. My people have worked those asteroid fields for 3 generations. We will not abandon them now. A chorus of angry voices erupted from the assembly. Representatives from the Terran Coalition, the Centauri Syndicate, and dozens of other factions began shouting accusations and demands. Marcus watched as the Queen's shoulders tensed, though her expression remained composed and regal. Your Majesty, called out Ambassador Harrington from the Terran delegation, his voice dripping with disdain. Your Empire's stubborn refusal to share resources is precisely what's driving this conflict. Perhaps it's time for new leadership in the Valorian territories. The chamber fell silent at the thinly veiled threat. Marcus felt something hot and protective surge in his chest as he watched the Queen stand alone against the sea of hostile faces. Every instinct told him to stay quiet, to follow protocol and let the senior diplomats handle the situation. But something about the way she held herself, proud and defiant even in isolation, spoke to something deep within him. Before he could stop himself, Marcus rose from his seat. With respect, Ambassador Harrington, that's completely out of line. Every head in the chamber turned toward him, and Marcus felt the weight of 1,000 stares. His mouth went dry, but he pressed on. Queen Zephyra's people have legal claim to those mining rights under the Galactic Accords of 2387. Instead of threatening regime change, maybe we should focus on finding a solution that respects existing treaties. Ambassador Harrington's face flushed red. Mr. Rivera, you're out of order. Sit down immediately. No, Marcus said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. I won't sit down while we're discussing stripping a sovereign nation of its lawful territory. The Valorian Empire has been nothing but cooperative in previous negotiations. They've shared technology, opened trade routes, and provided military support during the Andromedae crisis. This is how we repay that loyalty? He turned to face Queen Zephyra, whose violet eyes were now fixed on him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your Majesty, perhaps there's a compromise we haven't considered. What if the Valorian Empire retained primary mining rights, but agreed to a profit-sharing arrangement with the neighboring systems? It would provide the resources everyone needs while respecting your people's claims. The Queen's lips curved into the slightest of smiles. An interesting proposal, Ambassador Rivera. I would be willing to discuss such an arrangement, provided the terms are fair and the sovereignty of my empire is respected. The chamber erupted again, but this time the voices carried a different tone. Where before there had been only anger and accusation, now there were murmurs of consideration and cautious hope. Marcus felt his knees go weak as the adrenaline began to fade, but he remained standing As the session continued, Marcus found himself repeatedly catching the Queen's eye across the vast chamber. Each time their gazes met, he felt a strange warmth spread through his chest, as if she were seeing something in him that even he didn't know existed. When the formal proceedings finally ended 3 hours later, Marcus was exhausted but oddly exhilarated. He'd managed to help broker the beginning of a genuine negotiation between the Valorian Empire and the coalition of systems seeking mining access. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was progress. He was gathering his documents when a shadow fell across his desk. Looking up, he found himself face to face with Queen Zephyra herself. Up close, she was even more striking, her presence both alien and achingly beautiful. She moved with a fluid grace that reminded him of dancers he'd seen in the old Earth archives. "Ambassador Rivera," she said, her voice carrying musical undertones that seemed to resonate in his bones. "I wanted to thank you personally for your intervention today. It took considerable courage to speak against your own delegation." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I just couldn't stand by and watch injustice happen, Your Majesty. What they were suggesting wasn't right. Please, call me Zephyra," she said, extending a slender hand. "I believe we're going to be working closely together on this negotiation. I prefer a more personal approach with my allies." When Marcus took her hand, he was surprised by its warmth. He'd expected her skin to feel cold or different somehow, but her touch was remarkably human. A gentle current seemed to pass between them, and he noticed her eyes widen slightly, as if she'd felt it too. "I look forward to working with you, Zephyra," he managed, his voice slightly hoarse. "Though I should warn you, I'm still pretty new at this whole galactic diplomacy thing. You might want to keep your expectations reasonable." Her laugh was like silver bells, musical and genuine. "I think you underestimate yourself, Marcus. May I call you Marcus? Sometimes the best solutions come from those who aren't bound by conventional thinking. Your proposal today proved that." As they walked together toward the exit, Marcus couldn't help but notice how other delegates watched them with curiosity, and in some cases, disapproval. A human and a Valorian queen, walking side by side, was apparently unusual enough to draw attention. "Zephyra," Marcus said quietly, "are you sure it's wise for us to be seen together like this? I don't want to cause political problems for either of our governments." She paused in the corridor, turning to face him fully. Her violet eyes seemed to search his face for something. "Marcus, in my 300 years of life, I've learned that sometimes the most important alliances are the ones that seem impossible. Today you showed me that there are still those willing to stand for what's right, even when it's difficult. That kind of integrity is rare in any species. 300 years?" The reminder of her age should have made Marcus feel awkward, but instead it only added to her mystique. She had centuries of experience and wisdom, yet she was treating him as an equal. "Your Majesty ... Zephyra," he corrected himself. "I hope I can live up to your confidence in me. This crisis isn't going to be easy to resolve." "No," she agreed, a more serious expression crossing her features. "But I have a feeling that together we might find solutions that neither of us could discover alone. There's something about you, Marcus Rivera. Something that tells me our meeting today was no accident." As they reached the transport bay where their respective shuttles waited, Zephyra turned to him one final time. "I'm hosting a private dinner tomorrow evening to discuss the preliminary terms of the mining agreement. Nothing formal, just a chance to explore possibilities in a more relaxed setting. Would you join me?" Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "I'd be honored." "Excellent." She smiled, and for a moment, the weight of queenly responsibility seemed to lift from her shoulders, revealing someone younger and more vulnerable underneath. "Until tomorrow, then." As Marcus watched her glide toward her ornate shuttle, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a dramatic turn. He'd come to the council session as a junior diplomat, hoping to observe and learn. He was leaving as someone who had not only influenced galactic politics, but had somehow caught the attention of one of the most powerful and enigmatic leaders. In the known universe, the transport back to Earth's embassy was a blur of city lights and swirling thoughts. Marcus stared out at the alien skyline, trying to process everything that had happened. He'd always been drawn to lost causes and underdog stories, but this was something entirely different. Queen Zephyra wasn't a victim in need of rescue. She was a formidable leader who had chosen to see him as an ally. Back in his modest quarters, Marcus stood before his bathroom mirror, studying his reflection. Average height, brown hair that never quite cooperated, and eyes that his mother had always sighed were his best feature. He looked like exactly what he was, a young man from Earth who had stumbled into something much bigger than himself. Tomorrow's dinner would be crucial, not just for the mining negotiations, but for whatever was developing between him and the Queen. Marcus had dated before, of course, but never someone from another species, let alone royalty. The cultural implications alone were staggering. Bonds beyond politics, the Valorian embassy occupied an entire floating platform above the capital city. Its architecture, a stunning blend of crystalline spires and flowing organic curves that seemed to defy conventional physics. As Marcus approached in the diplomatic shuttle, he marveled at how the structure caught and refracted the setting sun's light, creating rainbow patterns that danced across its translucent walls. His formal dress uniform felt uncomfortably tight, as nervous energy coursed through his body. He'd spent the afternoon researching Valorian customs and etiquette, desperate not to embarrass himself or insult his host. The cultural database had been frustratingly sparse on details about private social interactions, focusing mainly on formal diplomatic protocols. The shuttle docked at a private landing bay, where Marcus was greeted by a tall, graceful Valorian aide whose skin held the same silvery blue hue as the Queen's, though less pronounced. "Ambassador Rivera, welcome to the embassy. Her Majesty is waiting for you in the garden pavilion." Marcus followed the aide through corridors lined with living walls of bioluminescent plants that pulsed gently with soft blue light. The very air seemed to shimmer with energy, and he could hear the faint sound of water flowing somewhere in the distance. Everything about the space felt alive and organic, so different from the sterile metal and plastic environments he was accustomed to. The garden pavilion took his breath away, an open-air space surrounded by floating pools of luminescent water, with pathways that seemed to be made of compressed starlight. Plants he couldn't identify swayed gently in a breeze that carried the scent of something like jasmine mixed with ozone. At the center of it all sat a table for two, its surface appearing to be carved from a single massive crystal. Queen Zephyra rose as he approached, and Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Gone was the formal regalia of the council chamber. Instead, she wore a flowing gown that seemed to be woven from moonbeams, clinging to her curves in ways that made it difficult for him to focus on anything else. Her hair was unbound, falling in silver waves past her shoulders, and her violet eyes seemed to glow in the pavilion's ethereal light. "Marcus," she said, her voice warm with genuine pleasure. "Thank you for coming. I hope the journey wasn't too uncomfortable." "Not at all," he managed, accepting the hand she offered. Again, that electric current passed between them, stronger this time. "This place is incredible. I've never seen anything like it." "I'm glad you approve." The garden was designed to promote relaxation and honest conversation. "I find that the most important discussions happen when we can set aside our formal roles and simply be ourselves." A servant appeared with drinks in vessels that looked like they'd been grown rather than manufactured. The liquid inside glowed with a soft golden light that pulsed gently, like a slow heartbeat. "It's called Lumina," Zephyr explained, noticing his curious expression. A traditional Valorian beverage. Completely safe for human consumption, I assure. It has a mild euphoric effect that helps lower social barriers. Marcus took a cautious sip and was surprised by the taste. Something between honey and starlight, if starlight had a flavor. Almost immediately, he felt a gentle warmth spread through his body, and the nervous tension he'd been carrying began to ease. Better? Zephyra asked with a knowing smile. Much, Marcus admitted, though I'm a little worried about what I might say under the influence of alien mood enhancers. I hope you'll say exactly what you're thinking, she replied, settling gracefully into her chair. I've had enough of diplomatic doublespeak to last several lifetimes. Tonight, I want to know who Marcus Rivera really is, not the Earth ambassador or the junior diplomat, just Marcus. As they dined on delicacies that Marcus couldn't identify but found surprisingly delicious, their conversation flowed with an ease that surprised him. Zephyra spoke of her childhood on Valoria Prime, describing a world of floating cities and crystal forests that sounded like something from a dream. Marcus shared stories of Earth, of growing up in the mountains of Colorado, of the first time he'd seen the ocean. You're not what I expected, Zephyra said as they finished the main course. When I first saw you in the council chamber, I thought you were just another ambitious young politician looking to make a name for himself. What changed your mind? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. The way you stood up for me without expecting anything in return. The passion in your voice when you spoke about justice and fairness. And she paused, her cheeks taking on a slightly deeper blue tint that Marcus was beginning to recognize as the Valorian equivalent of blushing. The way you looked at me. Not as a political asset or exotic curiosity, but as a person worth defending. Marcus felt heat rise in his own cheeks. You are worth defending. What the council was suggesting wasn't just wrong, it was cruel. You've given so much to the galactic community, and they were ready to throw it all away because of fear and greed. Zephyra leaned forward, her eyes intense. Why does it matter to you so much? Your career would be safer if you'd stayed silent. Marcus considered the question, the Lumina making it easier to access emotions he usually kept carefully controlled. My parents were refugees, he said finally. They fled Earth during the Water Wars when I was just a baby. We were taken in by a colony on Europa that had every reason to turn us away. Resources were scarce, and they were already struggling to survive. But they didn't. They saw people in need and chose compassion over fear. He took another sip of the glowing beverage, the memories flowing more freely now. I grew up knowing that my entire life existed because strangers chose to be kind when they could have been cruel. I swore I'd never be the person who stands by and watches injustice happen, especially when someone is standing alone against the crowd. Zephyr reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Her touch was warm and comforting, and Marcus felt something shift between them, a deepening of connection that went beyond mere attraction. You're remarkable, she said softly. In 3 centuries of life, I've met very few people with that kind of moral courage. Most are either too afraid or too selfish to risk themselves for others. 3 centuries, Marcus repeated, suddenly aware again of the vast difference in their lifespans. Zephyra, can I ask you something that might be inappropriate? Please do. Inappropriate questions are often the most honest ones. Don't you get tired? I mean, watching civilizations rise and fall, seeing people you care about age and die, while you remain? How do you find the strength to keep caring about anything? Her expression grew distant, and for a moment, Marcus worried he'd overstepped. Then she squeezed his hand gently. I do get tired, she admitted. There have been decades where I've wanted nothing more than to retreat to my private chambers and never emerge. The weight of responsibility, the constant political maneuvering, the loneliness of command, it can be overwhelming. What keeps you going? Hope, she said simply. The belief that somewhere in this vast universe, there are people like you. People who choose to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Every time I meet someone like that, they remind me why the struggle is worthwhile. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of dessert, a delicate confection. That tasted like crystallized starlight and dissolved on the tongue like snow. As they ate, Zephyra shared more personal stories. The pressure of ascending to the throne at a young age, the weight of decisions that affected billions of lives, the isolation that came with power. I haven't had a real friend in over 50 years, she confessed as they moved to a more comfortable seating area surrounded by softly glowing pools. People see the crown first, the person never. Even my closest advisors maintain that formal distance that duty requires. That sounds incredibly lonely, Marcus said, settling beside her on what felt like a cloud made solid. It is, which is why tonight has been such a gift. For the first time in decades, I'm just having a conversation with someone who sees me as Zephyra, not as Queen Zephyra of the Valorian Empire. They talked until the alien constellations reached their zenith, the lumina and the enchanted atmosphere of the garden, making everything feel dreamlike and significant. Marcus found himself sharing thoughts and feelings he'd never voiced to anyone, while Zephyra spoke with a vulnerability that he suspected few had ever witnessed. Marcus, she said as the evening began to wind down, I want to ask you something, but I'm afraid of your answer. Ask me anything. This connection between us, do you feel it too? Or am I projecting loneliness onto kindness? Marcus turned to face her fully, studying the uncertainty in her violet eyes. The question hung between them, like a bridge that could either connect them or collapse under the weight of honesty. I feel it, he said quietly. From the moment I took your hand yesterday, there's been something between us that I can't explain. It's not just attraction, though you're the most beautiful being I've ever seen. It's something deeper. Like recognition, relief flooded her features. I thought I was imagining it. The way my heart races when you look at me, the way your voice seems to resonate in my very bones. I've lived for 3 centuries and never experienced anything like this. Zephyra, Marcus said, reaching up to touch her face. Her skin was impossibly soft, warm, despite its unusual hue. I need you to know that whatever this is between us, I'm not inter. The mark of trust. 3 weeks had passed since that magical evening in Zephyra's garden, and the mining negotiations had progressed far better than anyone had expected. Marcus found himself spending increasing amounts of time at the Valorian embassy, ostensibly working on diplomatic details, but really finding excuses to be near the woman who had completely captured his heart. Their relationship had been developing in stolen moments between meetings, a touch of hands during document exchanges, lingering glances across conference tables, private dinners that stretched late into the night. They'd been careful to maintain professional appearances in public, but Marcus was beginning to suspect that their feelings for each other weren't as secret as they hoped. He was reviewing trade agreements in his temporary office at the embassy when Zephyra appeared in his doorway, her expression more serious than he'd seen in days. Marcus, we need to talk. The tone in her voice made his stomach clench. That sounds ominous. Did I do something wrong? No, quite the opposite. She entered the room and closed the door behind her. The Valorian High Council has requested a formal audience with you. They want to evaluate our relationship. Marcus set down his datapad, his full attention now on her. Evaluate how? Zephyra moved to the window, looking out at the city below. My people have been watching us. Marcus, despite our attempts at discretion, it's become clear that what's between us has moved beyond mere diplomatic cooperation. Are they angry? Opposed to it? I'm not sure yet. The High Council operates differently than human governments. They're more concerned with spiritual and cultural implications than political ones. The fact that they want to meet with you is actually significant. Marcus joined her at the window, studying her profile. Significant how? In Valorian culture, when a member of the royal family forms a deep bond with someone from another species, there are ancient protocols that must be followed. The High Council needs to determine whether you're worthy of that bond. And if they decide I'm not, Zephyra finally turned to face him, her violet eyes troubled. Then we'll face that challenge when it comes. But Marcus, there's something else. Something I haven't told you about Valorian bonding customs. The serious tone was making Marcus increasingly nervous. What kind of something? When two people form a true spiritual connection, what your people might call soulmates, there's a ceremony called the marking. It single quotes S. intimate and permanent. It binds two lives together in ways that go beyond marriage as humans understand. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Permanent how? The mark creates a psychic link between bonded partners. We would be able to sense each other's emotions, share strength in times of crisis, and double quotes. She hesitated. If one dies, the other typically doesn't survive long. The connection is that deep. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. Zephyra, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that the High Council will want to know if you're prepared to accept the mark, if you're ready to bind your life to mine in the most complete way possible. Marcus stared at her, his mind racing. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a junior diplomat focused on building his career. Now he was being asked to consider a mystical alien bonding ceremony that would fundamentally alter his existence. How do you feel about it? He asked quietly. Terrified, she admitted, and more certain than I've ever been about anything in my life. Marcus, I love you. Not the diplomat, not the novelty of a human partner, but you. Your compassion, your courage, the way you make me laugh even in the darkest moments. I want to spend whatever time we have together, whether that's 50 years or 500. 50 years? The bonding process extends human lifespan to match their Valorian partner. Another reason the High Council takes it so seriously. Marcus felt dizzy. Extended lifespan, psychic connections, ancient alien ceremonies. It was like something from a science fiction novel. But as he looked into Zephyra's eyes, saw the love and vulnerability there, all the logical objections seemed to fade away. When do we meet with the High Council? Tonight. The ceremony, if they approve and if you accept, would happen immediately afterward. Tonight? Marcus's voice cracked slightly. That single quotes S. soon. Zephyra took his hands in hers. I know it's overwhelming. If you need time to think, to prepare, I understand. This is a decision that will affect the rest of your very long life. Marcus thought about his life back on Earth, the career he'd been building, the family and friends he'd left behind. Then he thought about the past 3 weeks, the way he felt when he was with Zephyra, a sense of completeness that had been growing stronger each day. What does the ceremony involve? Ancient rituals, sacred vows, and the sharing of life. Essence. The details are complex, but the end result is that we would be bonded not just legally or romantically, but spiritually. Our souls would be intertwined. And you want this? With me? More than I've ever wanted anything, she said without hesitation. But only if you wanted to. This isn't something that can be undone, Marcus. Once we're bonded, we're together for the rest of our lives. Marcus pulled her closer, studying every detail of her beautiful alien features. The decision should have been impossible to make in a single conversation. But somehow, it felt like the easiest choice he'd ever faced. I love you too, he said, softly. And yes, I want this. I want you, whatever that means. however long it lasts. Relief flooded her expression. Are you certain? The High Council will test your resolve. They need to be sure you understand the magnitude of what you're accepting. I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. That evening, Marcus found himself in the deepest chambers of the Valorian embassy, in a circular room lined with crystals that hummed with energy. The High Council consisted of 5 ancient Valorians, their skin bearing intricate silver markings that seemed to pulse with their own light. They sat in floating chairs arranged in a perfect circle, their violet eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel like his soul was being examined. Zephyra stood beside him, magnificent in ceremonial robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. Her presence helped calm his nerves, though he could sense her tension through their growing connection. Marcus Rivera of Earth spoke, the eldest council member, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. You stand before us, seeking to bond with our queen. Do you understand what this means? I'm beginning to, Marcus replied honestly. And I want to learn more. The mark of bonding is not a human custom. It will change you in ways you cannot fully comprehend. Are you prepared to leave your humanity behind and become something new? The question caught him off guard. I don't want to stop being human. But if being with Zephyra means adapting, evolving, becoming more than what I am, then yes, I'm ready. Another council member leaned forward. And when the time comes to choose between your birth world and your bonded mate, when Earth and Valoria have conflicting interests, I hope it never comes to that. But if forced to choose, Marcus looked at Zephyra, seeing his future reflected in her eyes. I choose love. I choose the woman who makes me want to be better than I ever thought possible. The council members exchanged glances, communicating in ways Marcus couldn't detect. Finally, the eldest nodded. Your heart is pure, your intentions honest, but love alone is not enough. You must prove your worthiness through the trial of truth. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, the crystals around the room began to glow brighter. Energy filled the air, and suddenly he felt his consciousness being pulled away from his body, drawn into a space that existed between dimensions. He found himself reliving every moment of his relationship with Zephyra, but experiencing it from her perspective as well as his own. He felt her initial skepticism when he defended her, the growing respect and admiration, the moment she realized she was falling in love with him. But he also experienced her fears, the terror of opening her heart after centuries of isolation, the worry that he might be using her for political gain, the crushing weight of responsibility that came with her position. The trial showed him possible futures, versions where the relationship destroyed both their careers, where their love became a weakness exploited by enemies, where the cultural differences between them prove insurmountable. But it also showed him futures filled with hope, their love becoming a bridge between species, their partnership bringing peace to troubled regions of the galaxy, their bond inspiring others to look beyond surface differences to find common ground. When the visions ended, Marcus found himself back in the crystal chamber, tears streaming down his face. The experience had been overwhelming, but it had also confirmed what he already knew. His love for Zephyra was real and profound, and hers for him was equally deep. You have seen truth, the eldest council member said. Do you still wish to proceed? More than ever, Marcus said, his voice hoarse but determined. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. Ancient words in a language that seemed to resonate in his bones, crystals that pulsed with the rhythm of two hearts gradually synchronizing, energy that flowed between him and Zephyra like liquid light.